feeling really good. I screened the film today to
I know.
investors, and yes, and to like sponsors and investors, and just because I wanted them to, they deserve to see it. They helped put it together.
Well,
And that way,
I managed to watch most of it. The only bit I missed was the bit which was sad, was the bit with the Finnish mining thing. So I caught the beginning of it in the paper factory, and then I had to drop off because I was at an office in a meeting. So, but apart from that, I
ah,
caught all of it. It was amazing, by the way. It was actually better than I expected. I expected it to be really good, but I was like, this is incredible. It's really, I don't want to give too much away, but the way you've comboed like interviews and graphics and the music and everything, it's very engaging for a documentary, especially. It's like not dry at all.
yay, thank you. I mean, it's a very dry subject. It's chips,
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
data
computer
centers.
data centers. Yeah. So it's not really the sexiest subject. I mean, I'm happy that that it ended up being that way, because that's kind of what I hope that I could deliver that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy for me. So it feels like full circle because I think you were actually my second interview when I started interviewing Bitcoiners. So I think Hannah was my first. And then I'd seen you post on LinkedIn because you started to post saying that you were doing this film about Bitcoin mining. And I saw that you were in Puerto Rico and I was like, oh, Hannah, do you mind? Like, I see you're connected to her. Can you? I said, asked her if she knew you. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, can you ask her if I could interview her? Because I don't want to go in cold. And she's like, who the heck are you? So it's quite wild now that it's like I think you must have been what 6 months-ish into production there, and now it's like two years after you started. I think that it's complete.
That's a good point. That was, so I remember that we met in person in July of 23, right? For the
May.
Bitcoin
It was May and the
May.
Bitcoin conference. Yeah. Yeah.
May of 23. I mean, at May 23, I had already been doing it for a year by May, but I already knew you by May. So I had known you probably 6 months before or sometime before.
I think so. I think it was January that I interviewed you. Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Early, early. You had your
I
finger on the
know.
pulse.
I feel like. Well, I just thought it was really cool. Gosh, it's the perfect film, I think, to show normies for a start, because I think it just gives you the whole comprehensive thing from start to finish. So you really understand what the arguments against are, like what the benefits are, like who it impacts, how it impacts everything. I just think it's such a great piece of work. Um, Oh God, I just feel like what a journey to get here for a start. And I think it's funny because in some ways I feel very invested in it because I've kind of known you from reasonably near the start of it. So I've sort of seen a lot of like the ups and downs, and you've been very open about sharing your journey, very candid about what's difficult and when you've had tough times getting investors or logistics or things like that. Could you talk a little bit about the journey? Just talk about the when you had the idea and then some of the process of actually getting to the finished product and what that was like.
I've already spent 2 years on this project. I had been a top of my ladder producer um, at my corporate job, but the equivalent in the Hollywood space is not the same role. Like that same level producer is just not the same type of producer. And so I had other friends that became like executive producers in different projects, and I started seeing what they were doing, and I was like, oh, that's kind of a very different task because they have to, they have to get investors, they have to get distribution, they have to, there's a lot of money involved in the business of filmmaking. It's one of the reasons why it's separated from just, making videos. Like at this point, it's still an MP4. It's still an MOV file at the end of the day, a movie and a YouTube video. What separates one and makes one so valuable, and it's multiples of millions, and what makes one multiples of million people watch it and they give you a like maybe, but there's no financial, but it's just free content. And I definitely building a career on creating that free content and creating a lot of engaging YouTube content. I just wondered, would people pay for this? Like, people actually, well, they watch it, but it's because it's free. But would people pay for this? And, as a person, and I started seeing, what do I pay for? What kind of movies, what kind of films, what kind of formats do I ingest media in a way that I want to pay for? It feels premium. And so I knew when I quit my job that I wanted to pursue, I liked the hat. I liked that hat. And I wanted to leave my corporate kind of time because and just go straight to my company. And so I was prepared already mentally to be the executive producer of Dirty Coin and taking it from inception, raising funds, establishing the company, the LLC, applying for the film commission. So Dirty Coin is a Puerto Rico LLC with a film decree. So anybody that's on the island will tell you that that is a lawyer and accounting hill. And so I went into it knowing that I wanted to make it a legitimate movie. I wanted the film commission to get behind it. When I decided to go with so I already knew I was going to make a movie. I knew I was going to make a movie. I didn't know I was going to be a Bitcoin mining movie. But I just felt like with all of as a Bitcoiner, and you do your Ikigai, like, I knew that I was going to be involved in this project for like 2-3 years. And I was like, what subject that I love? Because there are many. What can I sink my teeth in for 2.5, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, probably the rest of my life? Ken Burns still answers questions about movies that he made 40 years ago. So a movie never leaves you. And so I was like, what is the subject that I'm willing to like keep talking about until I'm an old lady? You remember that dirty coin you made? It's like, fuck, dude, that was a long time ago, So, but it just never leaves you. And so I wanted to work on something that would be worth my time. And I felt like energy and Bitcoin and money and the internet and the climate. And there were so many things that drew me personally to this subject that I felt wasn't there were so many rabbit holes that I had personally gone, and I felt like it's tough to expect everybody else to know what you know about the subject because they don't go down those rabbit holes. They're going down their own rabbit holes.
It's funny actually what you say, because I hadn't really thought of the documentary or film that way, but it's kind of like a piece for our era, because it brings together like the internet, it brings together all the environmental discussions that are going on, it brings together this new form of money. It's actually very much like one for our generation. It's like if you look at this film in 100 years' time, it will be very representative of like these last few decades. It's almost like if you had to encapsulate, I don't know, the 1990s to the 2020s. It's like that.
Oh, fuck. Thank you. That's a great
Yeah.
review.
Well, I hadn't really thought
I,
about that. When you're talking about it, I was like, oh my God, yeah, it does bring all those threads together. Like if you were born in 1970, you would watch this thing and think, oh my God, what is this? But if you watch this in like 2050, it's going to look like it kind of captured a period of time that we were going through these changes. So it's quite crazy. Can you explain what the difference is? By the way, you touched upon this big application for the Film Commission in Puerto Rico. Like, what does that actually give you? What does that mean?
so what that means is it's a legitimate film. So there's a film commission that says this is a movie. It has been audited. The budget has gone to all these different things. Taxes have been paid on these people. This is a legitimate film that anybody could buy, anybody could license at a higher level, right? You hear about these big movie deals all the time. So we have a tax structure and a legal structure that allows us to be an intellectual property that can exchange in that way. And we also get a 4%. The 4% tax benefit is something that a lot of these decrees have. In fact, I believe all of them is either 4% or 0% for different things. Us, when we sell and when we license the film, we only pay 4% tax on that licensing fee. So if we were in a different state, that would be considered like a digital download or something like that, or different rules. But by us being a film and by us being a Puerto Rico based film, we are exporting that intellectual property outside of this island. And we made it in this island, and we went through an audit process that verified that we did make it on this island and that we paid taxes on everyone that was involved, you know? So that's the whole thing, that it's proof of work, in my opinion, you know, like now, and when I see that another actor or production had the film commissions involved, I'll be like, all right, you went through all those hoops. I know the hoops you went through. So yes, but the reason for that is because ultimately we do end up having a very positive tax structure from a from a business perspective. Anything that Dirty Coin does, whether it's the documentary, merch, anything that we export out of this island, we have low taxes.
So that's interesting, because having gone through the process of doing that, which, as you said, was quite laborious, would you recommend that any budding filmmakers actually domicile themselves, or go through the same process and work out of Puerto Rico? Like, do you think that the experience was positive, and do you think that it's a net benefit, and that would you encourage others to do the same, having gone through it?
I think that's a great question. As a producer, the reason why I know all of that, of like having paid taxes on everybody, and like the reason why I know it so well, how to do it legally, how all of the people that I pay need to themselves have a merchant's agreement. So, and I need to 1099s in the United States. You just you pay them their full fee, and the contractor is in charge of doing their own taxes at the end of the year. In Puerto Rico, they send you an invoice, and you have to pay Hacienda, pay the local tax, and pay the person immediately. So like that needs to happen, not immediately, within a month, within the 15th of the next month. So
Mm.
I had been doing that. And so I had to go back and repay everyone. Something that I would have had to find out anyway while I was doing my end of the year taxes, which we ended up doing now anyway, but we started the audit process before. So it was good to find out. When we found out, we were able to pay back taxes, but you pay for the lawyers, you pay for the auditors, you pay for so many people, and they have flat fees. So I believe that if you have a low budget film, a film that is under honestly $1 million in our case, I just don't know if all of the hoops and all of the people that I had to pay in order to find out something that I would have found out a couple months later, you know, like it's not like I would have found out eventually, but I guess we'll see at the end of this tax credit process, because at the end of it, once they examine where the money was spent, because they go through all the money, all of the money that was spent in Puerto Rico is eligible for a 40% tax credit. So of the total amount, we can receive 40% tax credits back. If you have a very high budget film, that 40% can be a lot of money. You know,
And
you're spending.
how do you qualify for that? Because you're Puerto Rican, so like, do you have to be domiciled there? Do you have to? Does that have to be, your nationality? I don't know if you can call it that really, because it's like, but what's the criteria for qualifying, and how much of the film has to actually
Applying.
be made?
Applying. So there are foreign production companies that they will do certain scenes here, because let's say the scene is going to cost, I don't know, $500,000. Some of these scenes, some of these big productions, right? If they do it here, they know they're going to get 40% off their $500,000 on their scene here. So they get that money back. And so there are excellent production companies. I went to LA and to the American Film Market, and I went to a couple of the panels of people explaining how they do it. And if you basically map out your film around film commissions, that was like, oh, well, if we go to Slovenia gives you 80% tax credits or 100% tax credits, all the money that you spent or whatever. I won't, don't quote me on the laws, but you can say this scene goes in that country because that country will do this for us. And not only will they do this, they'll connect us with crew, they'll connect us with lodging, like they will encourage us to come and make the movie in their country. So Puerto Rico does the same thing. And that you don't need to make the whole movie here. You can just make a certain part of the production here. And there are rules and regulations. You have to make the film legally here, which I think is a benefit to the industry, because then you're having to pay fair wages, you're having to retain taxes, you still a pain in the ass, but at least you're doing it like in a legal way, which really should be the way that production should run anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I would say that for my next one, if it depending on how much I want to do a math after all of this, like a calculation, how much do we actually end up spending versus making. Again, like I said, a lot of flat fees. If your movie is a low budget movie, or your scene, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do it here because it just requires so much work. But if you're going to be getting a lot of money back with these tax credits, and in Puerto Rico, there's a huge amount of people that buy these tax credits, you know, you end up getting a lot of your money back. So right now, right now we finished the movie. When we get those tax credits, we'll be able to use a lot of those tax credits to help distribute the movie. So now we enter a different phase, and it helps us get those funds.
So I'm really curious about the process that you go through as a filmmaker. So when you sort of decided you were like, I want to make a kind of a feature length, is that the right terminology? Production. So not just short videos, but I want to do something that's, you know, kind of a high budget, high quality, or whatever you want to call it. What next? Because then you were like, okay, fine, I'm going to pick the topic of Bitcoin because it's something I'm passionate about and I care about. And then what happens? Like, do you storyboard? Do you go talk to people? Like, what's the creative process?
I wrote a story for the documentary of at first I aimed for 82 minutes. That was like my first aim, was 82 minutes. And what I broke down what those 82 minutes were going to look like. What we're going to say for 3 minutes, for 5 minutes, for 4 minutes, for 3 minutes. And they were kind of questions that I had and people that I should ask. So I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. It was like mining in this place. What does it look like in there? Like, I don't know. So the story wasn't like, and this is what happens in Paraguay. It was like Paraguay, and who's mining in Paraguay, and who will trust me to be on camera for my documentary called Dirty Coin, you know, when there are tons of Matt Walsh from What is a Woman. He created an organization that had a name that was a kind of rug pulley for certain, and that's how he was able to get certain
Oh,
interviews.
is that how he did it?
And
I didn't know that. I haven't actually seen the movie
yeah,
yet. People have told me that it's very good, but I didn't know that that's how he got away with it. Ugh.
that's how he did
A
it.
bit shady.
It is, you know, and I think that it's also, a lot of people don't do their own research. I'm sure that if they would have dug, they would have eventually found
Like, oh,
out.
yay, somebody asked me to be on TV. Yes, of course I'll go.
Exactly. And Bitcoiners are not like that, especially not miners. When I'm asking them, hey, can I go to your mining operation in the middle of nowhere? Like, it was
And by the
like,
way, my movie's called Dirty Coin. Is that all right?
and my
Cool.
movie's
Yeah.
called Dirty. Yeah, it was a tough one. So I had to kind of win everybody one by one. I feel like everybody that is in that film, I had to win over one by one. And every investor and everybody as well, because I don't want to say I had a clear vision, because I didn't know what I was going to find. And ultimately I knew that nobody at Bitcoin Inc. was going to protect me if what I said was wrong about Bitcoin. You know, if I have a client and they pay me to make something, you know, it's kind of their content. It's not my content. I'm making it for them. But when you're a filmmaker and your subject is Bitcoin, nobody at Bitcoin is going to come and save you. That being said, of course,
They will all
Bitcoiners.
pile in and tell you what you got wrong, but nobody's saving your ass.
Yeah, and then they want it for free as well after all this situation. But for me as a filmmaker, I was like, nobody at Bitcoin was hiring me to do this. This was my name on the line. It's a film by me. So I wanted to make sure that I reported what I saw. And at the same time, I didn't report because I'm not a reporter. Like I wanted to make a good movie because my intention going in was always to make a movie. And so and Stranded has been shown like a movie. It has, even though it has been shown at like bars and restaurants and conferences, and but it gets shown, and I didn't put it online until Indie Hub. Like I wanted to have that I wanted to increase the value of the work, and the value, I felt like I could increase that by increasing the value of the setting. um so I've always known what I was going to do. I wasn't sure it was going to be Bitcoin, and I have really brilliant people that answer all my questions all the time. So I feel like I also have really good mentors, and most of my mentors are not in Bitcoin, and they've enjoyed learning about Bitcoin. And they're more in film, they're in production, they're in distribution, they're in advertising, they're in different areas. And so it's been good to kind of craft the my life from being deep Bitcoin and being like deep not Bitcoin.
Yeah, I thought one thing, and I don't want to give out too much away, but I loved some of the pieces that you had where there were kind of the statistics and the facts and how certain things, the process, like when Troy Cross does that section where he walks through, this is what the journey was and how we got from A to B. I thought that
Yes.
was actually such a valuable piece of information, and I'd never heard anyone explain it that clearly. And I was just like, oh, that's super interesting, because he's gone and dug in to try and figure out like what all the steps were to get from here to here. And I was like, this is actually really very well articulated for anyone that doesn't know the ecosystem that well. And also I thought the pieces with Senator Cynthia Loomis as well were excellent. Like I just loved the way that they were all juxtaposed, all of that, and how she explained it in the context of the economy. And yeah, I mean, it's so full of I was trying to watch it a little bit with like a critical creative eye, and I was like, wow, it's like I thought this about the clip that you did as well, that the use of music, the way that you weave the soundtrack into it is so good. It's so
Oh.
good. It really brings it together. And I really want to understand like how does that happen? Like, do you create the piece of film first and then just find music that matches it? Or do you hear the music in your head while you're composing that section? Like, how does that actually work creatively speaking?
Well, for us, I always think of the music first because the music is the vibe that I feel the scene should have. So I'll think there's a part in the movie, for example, that things get really intense, and it just gets intense. And I wanted the next song to almost feel like the next track, and completely different, like in a different radio station on a different day, like very different. And so for me, it was like that feeling of, whoa, all right. And so that's what I'm looking for. And my editor and I, we would put different music together, a lot of like popular music that we knew we weren't going to end up using because Juan Lugo, all of the music is originally composed.
Is
So
it?
yes, all of it,
Wow.
every second. And so what we did was the editing phase is you build a lot of things that you never use. And so you're not going to make original music for everything. So the first cut is all with our music. So different music that we found that we incorporated as cues for Huang. Like this is what it should sound like.
Like this is
So
the
it
vibe for
ends up
this section.
sounding different. Exactly. So he gets it for like the beat, he gets it for, because we also need the music to edit it, because we need to be able to like time it. So he'll just remove the music and get the vibe, get the beat, and then he'll create his own music, making everything cohesive. Because at the end of the day, the cut that we had was great because we used a lot of popular music that we would never be able to use. But in a way, I preferred his, even though you don't recognize any of the songs, because it feels like it's all out of one movie. Like it is all one sound.
Well, so
Where
now this begs the obvious
about
question: are you going to release the soundtrack?
well, it's the contract has it written that it has an open door for that.
You
Yes,
should.
it has an open door. Right now we're planning an audiobook for a Halloween release.
What, so like a
So,
voiceover, like the kind of voice you mean of it, or just like the story but told in audio?
So what I'm thinking for the audiobook, based on other audiobooks that I've seen, and based on our publisher, that I actually got a publishing deal for the audiobook before. I still don't have a licensing deal for Dirty Coin, but we already had a book deal because I explained my concept to a publisher, and they were like, yes, let's do it. And I don't know if you've ever heard like an NPR special
Hmm.
where it's very engaging the way that you're listening to it. And I would weave it a little bit more together myself as the filmmaker, as like just kind of tee some things off that I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't want to do in Dirty Coin. I wanted Dirty Coin to be kind of like its own thing. And the audio book is going to be additional scenes that didn't make it into Dirty Coin, because ultimately there are only so many, like as you mentioned, I covered a lot of places, but at the same time it needs to only be about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, because that's why you came to watch this movie in particular, like that was why you clicked on it. So it had to be focused at the same time. And we interviewed really incredibly smart people that had incredible mind-blowing things to say, and we wove it, especially at the early beginnings, because the scenes were so good. We would be going through the footage and like just kind of roughly cutting these conversations out. And we have so many different ideas about different things that I just didn't add them to Dirty Coin, because I felt that it was going to dilute
Mm.
what Dirty Coin is about, which is specifically about energy. So if I went down the rabbit hole of, you know, central banks, for example. I mean, there's other documentaries for that. And I wanted to stay as narrow as possible. But in the audiobook, we have an opportunity to kind of expand. And I would always kind of tie the questions back to mining or energy or infrastructure. So I still feel like it still feels like Dirty Coin. It's just not enough to be in the movie. So so with building off scenes that made it to end like near the end of the final cuts. So that's what I'm going to be putting together for Halloween and time it with the movie. So if people like the movie, they can then listen to the audiobook and kind of go deeper into other areas that the movie only kind of barely touches.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool. That's a very, very cool project. Can you just say the name again of who your the soundtrack musician was, your composer?
Oh, Juan Lugo. Juan Lugo.
And where do you
Um,
find him?
But if you look him up on Spotify, his Spotify name is Se Cicada, and I'll send you the link for this. If you notice the trailer that I put in Miami, that I showed in Miami, is one of his songs, because he and I decided to do our music together when I moved to Puerto Rico. So he is a Puerto Rican that lived in California for a long time. I'm a Puerto Rican that also lived in California for a long time. But I was in NorCal and he was in SoCal. He was in LA. So we never knew each other in California. But we both happened to move to the island at the same time, and we have a couple of mutual friends. And everybody kept saying, like, you guys have to meet. Like, you guys have like such a similar life. And so when we met, and we do we're like twin souls. So we're like really good friends. And I love his music. Like, he's an incredible musician. I would listen to it all the time. And so we decided to make the soundtrack together. And that's why I know that there are open doors. It's just that right now between the audiobook and the movie, that's all I can really focus on. And we'll still be using some of the music in the audiobook, but how we're going to create an album of the music, I feel like I want to do that right. And I'm not ready to do that right.
Oh, I'd love that though. I think that would be really cool. I mean, that was honestly like one of the things that really struck me about the film was the soundtrack. But it's funny coming back to your point about the cutting room floor. I don't know how you do that because it must be so tough to spend a lot of time, money, like energy going and interviewing people, doing that whole process. And then at the end of it, when you put the whole thing together, you have to be so brutal about cutting stuff out. And then, like to your point, stuff gets left on the cutting room floor that's actually amazing, but you have to make those tough decisions. Like, did you find that hard, or are you quite a brutal producer?
I'm both. I am both. I am like like I have these two personalities. And because I am the producer and I've done this for so long and I've produced for other directors as well. And
Mm.
so I've been a producer, and I know ultimately what a piece needs to be. A piece needs to be what the piece is, and it cannot be everything. And sometimes the piece is already a lot. So it's like, because you're making compromises with yourself as a director. And in my case, of course, there were certain things that at the very end, I was like, we have to, like we have to put this in there. Um, but it's extremely tough because we interviewed 78 people, 78 brilliant people. And to your point, every interview was as well recorded as possible. There's only one laptop interview in the whole film. One looks like a laptop interview, but
That
it
was the guy
isn't.
with the yellow background, right? Like the
Yes,
yellow
yes.
kitchen. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I saw the angle and I was like, that's got to be on a Zoom call.
That's the only one. That's the only one. And the reason why was, and that was actually one of my last editions, because I was like, nobody, and I kept like scrubbing through the footage and scrubbing through the footage, and I was the only one like saying it in the question, and I didn't want to make point that way. And so I got Spencer. I was like, Spencer, if I ask you a couple, because I knew that if you come from data center background, you know that this is a data center issue as well. But if you don't, then you don't, you maybe, for a lot of people, a lot of Bitcoiners, their first in like real knowledge of data centers was through Bitcoin mining. Like they learned about Bitcoin mining first, and then they kind of branched. Oh yeah, that's how it works. Most people
Mm.
don't even know what a data center is, right? So it's no knock. But
I do because my husband's a network engineer, so he talks about them all the time.
there you go. So the people that know how these computers work and in the cloud and data centers, they then look at Bitcoin and they're like, oh, like this thing I do, like computers, like that. I know your industry. And so I needed him to say certain points about how this is not just Bitcoin. And I felt that there was no real quote in the movie. And what's funny is that we cut out a lot of people. And Spencer was one of my last interviews. The interview was 11 minutes long. And I think I used like 6 minutes of his interview.
Hmm.
He was just like, I felt like everything. I asked him specifically the questions that I knew
Go
of things that
Spencer.
he was saying. And he was so good. But honestly, he was like, it's why I wanted to interview other people. And it's why I didn't want to say things as a narrator. I feel like a lot of documentaries, um, I won't knock any in particular, but like one major energy documentary that was like a mainstream documentary, most of it is a voiceover, most of it is
Mm.
narration. And I understand why, and it works in certain ways, but as a filmmaker, being able to get that from the mouth of the person in the industry and really get that from the source rather than like written. I don't know. I obviously, that's a separate conversation, but I'm happy
How do
that I
you
ended
do
up
that?
interviewing.
I was going to say, how do you do that out of interest? Do you just sit there with your list of questions, the camera's on them, you ask the questions, and then you just edit your question out and you just hear them with their response? Because it comes across really like it's nice. It's a very natural flowing feeling when there's just snippets and quotes of them saying stuff as though they sort of spontaneously were giving. There was one guy actually that I felt he was obviously very well versed in explaining things, and it was one of the guys at the. It was when they explained the whole process for biofuel. I thought that was I was like, this guy's obviously explained this many, many times. He must have done a presentation at some point. Because he's very technical, but like explaining it as to somebody who just is not technical. And he's just like, these are all the steps. And I was like, oh, that was actually one of the bits that I loved about it. I learned so much about subjects that I know nothing about in a digestible way without feeling like I was in a university lecture and somebody was droning on for hours. I was just like, oh, I can actually
The
take
fine
stuff
line
away.
there.
Yeah, I can take stuff away from this. And I'm like, oh, I get it now. Oh, now I understand this thing that everybody drops the lingo in, but nobody explains to you what it actually means. And I actually think for certainly for non-Bitcoiners, but even for Bitcoiners who don't understand Bitcoin mining and how the coin, because many people don't understand the mechanics of it. I think it's just fantastic the way it takes you through that journey to explain every single step of it in a way that's entertaining that you then retain because it had the nice music, it had the good graphics, it had somebody said a nice quote. You know what I mean? It's like it sticks. Actually, do you know what? They should show this in schools. Like this should be like a part of like an educational program. It's like you need to watch this documentary because this is how like it will explain it to you. That
Well,
actually would be a good
funny that you
place.
say that. I'm looking at the library program right now. Because the library licenses movies and documentaries, and I hit a lot of the, BIPOC check boxes, and I am so happy because I want to bring these conversations to places as a female Latina filmmaker. I want to talk about tech and
Uh,
Bitcoin and communication and privacy. And it's as a female filmmaker through this process, there were several grants for female filmmakers that were making movies about certain subjects. And it did not include tech. Tech wasn't one of them, unless it's like, tech for something like things have gotten certain, not everyone, God. I've also found incredible gems in this process as well and great film festivals, but it seems like certain festivals have gone the route of just supporting whatever mainstream now or something really good that challenges the mainstream now just to get that conversation. You're still talking about the mainstream now, whether it's for it or against it. And so to come out with something that is not a bad movie and have it be about something that is very often like shadow subjects, Bitcoin mining, energy, climate, it's like I wanted to pierce that bubble. I wanted to get in there, and it's always been a Trojan horse, but a very terribly disguised one. If you pay any attention to this Trojan horse, you know exactly the intentions of the horse, but it still is like, it still functions as that because the very first time that somebody sees it, I spoke with somebody that truly thought that my documentary was anti-Bitcoin in Poland, and they thought like, wow, what a cool festival that allows like an anti-Bitcoin documentary at their festival. And so, and he was pro Bitcoin mining, but he thought like, well, she's so nice, I guess, whatever. Like, 'cause he met me before, and then he sees it, and then he's like, oh my God, like there are still people that even people that know me or that are in the space that don't know what the documentary is about, or like in terms of the angle, what's the angle? And it's like, what do you mean? What's the angle? The angle is I spent 2 years interviewing really smart people in this space, and I found a really interesting story about Bitcoin mining. And that's the angle. Like the angle is my story. It's how I saw it, but I'm not in the movie, but I am in the movie. I have a couple
Yeah,
cameos.
I mean, in fairness, I would say to the team in at the Bitcoin Film Fest in Warsaw, I think they would have. I think they would have actually platformed it, even if it had been very much saying that this was a bad thing. Because
They
I just
didn't
think,
know it.
yeah, but
They
I feel like they're so open-minded just in terms of the
yeah.
content that they have that I think they would have been like it would just this would be an interesting discussion point. But I'm curious actually about that because you obviously started the film as a Bitcoiner who understood data centers, but maybe didn't know all of the intricacies of Bitcoin mining, without giving too much away about what happens in the documentary and like the journey that it takes, did you find that any of your opinions changed as you went through?
Yes, yes. Evolved, matured. Some of my opinions matured. All of my opinions matured on everything ever, all the time. It's a learning experience every moment of the day. I would say matured because there's so much context that only life and time can give you. Only so much context that when you talk to the person there and you get to see what they say about it, and you get to use your eyes observation and you see, is Bitcoin actually being used here? No. Or wow, fuck, nobody told me it was used so much. There were those moments of in the whole process that, I mean, I can tell you that there are certain countries, especially in Eastern Europe and certain areas of Spain, that um, Bitcoin adoption, the amount of people using Bitcoin um, in a peer-to-peer way is very active, very, very active. So I hadn't really, as an American that has always really just had like the Coinbase or I don't even know what we bought when we first bought, but like it's always been like a super legitimate, here's my bank account, here's all of my KYC kind of way. Of course, as I matured as a Bitcoiner, I learned about other things as well, but always from that American viewpoint and in America where people are still not using Bitcoin in the same way. Again, it depends on where, because there are places that, yeah. So you see, so my opinion obviously just matured because there's so much nuance to the conversation, and every city depends on how many leaders you have in the Bitcoin space, how many percentage of companies are in Bitcoin. And so you have like higher concentration of the population that understands Bitcoin and finds a local way that they can apply a business model that ends up serving the community and serving, the company itself as well. So I think that it's different everywhere. So I guess it just became a lot more clear, the image from a 2D picture to like, there's depth and there's things that this picture doesn't reveal. So yeah, absolutely. Opinions changed.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I mean, I just find that's the other thing as well that I really got from the documentary was just how diverse the adoption was and for different purposes. Like it was very clear that Bitcoin's a really funny thing like that. I always puzzle about it because it seems to bring all these threads together. And I know it's like a sort of running joke where it's like, oh, Bitcoin fixes this. But it kind of is because you had like the environmentalists talk about aspects, and you've got business people, you've got kind of, grid infrastructure, you've got communities. The scenes, by the way, in Africa were just absolutely stunning. I was like, I've never been to the African continent proper, like to sub-Saharan Africa. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. I was just like, I don't know if they're trying to make this place look like the best tourist destination on earth, but I was like, oh my God, this is absolutely stunning. Um, I'm
I
really curious
recommend
as
watching. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, but I'm curious as well because you've seen now so much of like the different communities and what it's like. Do you have a different vibe with the different areas that are kind of adopting Bitcoin when you visited?
Absolutely, because
Mm.
ultimately it's whoever. Bitcoin isn't like a plant, Bitcoin mining, all the computers look the same, but ultimately Bitcoin is there because, I mean, a plant in the sense of like it just sprouted. Bitcoin is there because somebody took Bitcoin there. So one person decided to create a mine, create a company, talk about it, like it was one person. So who did that and who their friends were and who were the first adopters kind of taints or helps the second ring and the third ring and the fourth ring. And there are certain places that I went that I have heard, for example, from women that is a very sexist Bitcoin community, that it's very hard. And I had personally not experienced that because I was in California, you know, California's super mixed. And yeah, it was small amount of women, but there were women in the group, and men are super respectful. And, you know, for the most part, whatever, everything is always a generalization, but I was used to, I never encountered any assholes in my like immediate community. So, and then I visited some of those places and I'm like, yeah, okay, this guy's an asshole. I can see I can see her perspective on this. And, but at this point that happened 5 years ago, 6 years ago, people need to move on in all, camps, say sorry, whatever, because they're still in Bitcoin, on both sides. So yeah, different places have different vibes, because even though it's still Bitcoin, it's like, who's the head honcho of the Bitcoin, and who's the person doing the meetups, and who's the person that's like doing the conferences, and in the case of Puerto Rico, for example, Bitcoin and crypto are mixed. So
Oh,
the
really?
person
That's interesting. Huh. So what, you have
there's
less of like a kind of a rabid maxi crowd versus other areas? Huh.
I think that we have the Braby Maxi crowd, but they're not interested in like, okay, again, generalizations, it's tough. There are those that want to help, but there are those that are just here just to live life on the beach, have fun with cool people, do Bitcoin with their Bitcoin folks, and not really interact with anybody, not evangelize locally. It's just like, just doing their Bitcoin stuff. And I have a lot of those friends. They're great people, and I understand them, after years and years of grind, just wanting to like grind from like a cool place with their family. I get that. But then you also get so much more crypto folks. So many rug pulls come to the island because of these same tax credits that I was telling you about that are so great, that enable me to make my movie here.
Oh.
If I have a token from here, or if I launch any kind of rug pool from this island, I also have tax benefits, including no capital gains on the money that I take out of a rug pool. So there are just so many people that have used the island throughout history, not necessarily all at once, but just like memorable ones, that ultimately cheated a lot of people from their money. And when people here in Puerto Rico think Bitcoin, they think of all of those like news stories of all these fucking crypto people that did XYZ. And that's what Bitcoin means here. So here it is definitely a dirty coin. Like, it was like, no, there's no respect for it as a rebel coin at all. In fact, it's like you're a gringo crypto guy if you're in Bitcoin.
It's funny because whenever I tell people how many Christians there are in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and all the people will ask me why I'm only promoting Bitcoin and not crypto, and I say, well, it's mostly for ethical reasons, and it's like blah blah blah, but they just look at me like I'm speaking Martian or something. Like, you can see the brain is just short circuiting, and they're like, I don't compute, and I'm like, yeah, you don't.
I was like, where do I start? Oh my God. I mean, and in the movie, we have a chapter of crypto versus Bitcoin. And as you could see, it did not make it in the movie. And it's because we opened certain doors and took the movie in a direction that was so far off that, and
It
a
would have been a
lot of
different
people,
movie.
it would have been a completely different movie, and I feel like it would have alienated a lot of folks, a lot of crypto folks. And my intention at this moment is to bring light to this, not to cast shadow on anybody else. Maybe there are other projects in the future, maybe, but I feel like I don't know how long I'm alive, and I have to watch these scenes over and over again, and it just can't get too negative, or it can't get too dissy or shadowy, because we have so much positive things to cover, and that's where we will grow. We'll grow from the potential, not from whatever is happening on the sidelines. There's the builders right now are having a great time, so let's bring that great time and that light to everybody, and not spend too much time dissing, because we've done enough dissing.
I
So
think you also just give it too much energy. I mean, this is what I keep saying to people about all this ordinal stuff. I'm like, I get why people are upset about it, but I'm like, it's a commons. You can use it how you want, and like, don't give it more airtime. It's like, who cares? Somebody's using it in a way that you don't like it. Oh well, maybe they don't like the way that you use it. And it's fine. It's just like whatever, let it go. I just don't like amplifying that stuff when it doesn't need to be. One thing I'm going to ask you actually is, I mean, I know we talked prior offline about like what next project you might have, but when you look at the whole ecosystem, because there's quite a few very good like pieces of Bitcoin content in terms of like documentaries and movies, like Pierre Corbin's made some great films as well. Which story do you think is missing currently? Because you've filled a huge gap, I think, in the Bitcoin mining piece of, the piece is very comprehensive, and it's a very good reference point now. Like as a go-to, it will kind of it will last as a historical record, but it's also extremely relevant to today. But what stories do you think are not being told that could be told?
privacy online. And I think that there are some people that are definitely like doing it. Just like there were a million Bitcoin mining videos on YouTube before Dirty Coin too. So there's always people doing it, but it's how it gets done and who it gets to that is, I think, super important. How do we bring it to mainstream? And I think that bringing the right to privacy is really important. And there are some people that are doing it. And so it's not that it's not being done. It hasn't been done
At scale.
at scale yet. And a lot of it is still in production. So there might be some of those movies already in production. But I feel like that is a really important topic of respecting our rights as digital citizens, because this is the way that we're going to interact in the world. And we're talking about surveillance of all of your life, all of your conversations, all of your everything, every message, every website, every search, every person you talk to, everything you talk about, all of it is exposed and can be used against you. And there's just, we lose so much. And that's actually one of the reasons why Dirty Coin, I want people to see it in person, because you gotta talk about it in person. Like let's get people together having conversations, not just about Dirty Coin. Oh, hey, nice to see you here. I'm gonna talk to you about this now. That like it's important to have these one-to-one peer-to-peer communication, and we're losing that. And with increasingly all of our interactions being virtual interactions. So knowing and understanding how to be private, how to keep your privacy online and selecting what to reveal about yourself is something that I personally want to learn a lot about. I'm not going to make that movie right now, but I would definitely back anybody that is, and I would, see where they're at and see how I could help, because this is an area where I would like to learn more of, and I would like to just like bubble that up. And if we could create, so my bigger picture with Campo Libre, which is my production company for the movies, so I have a corporate production company, and we still do work for Silicon Valley companies, not as much because Dirty Coin has taken up so much. But my idea with Dirty Coin is to really learn how to make very successful independent movies, independent documentaries, independent movies, and produce them, direct some of them. I have several scripts that are in progress or done. So I have movies myself. Plus, I know of other filmmakers that have excellent ideas that all they need is money. And so right now, my focus as the CEO of the company is to use Dirty Coin as a case study of how to make a movie for not a lot of money. That's, a good movie that's needed. Obviously, there's an ethos to the company as well, which kind of topics we're going to choose, and really get this engine going of putting out not just my movies, but movies of other filmmakers that are not the movies that Hollywood is backing, or that any grants are there. We don't fit in the box, in any of the boxes. I tell you, as somebody that have been trying to look for a box for 2 years, I don't exist. My box doesn't exist. Bitcoin Film Festival was like one of the first times I was like, oh, interesting. This is good. This
Here's my
is
box.
great.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like watching the documentary, to me, it feels something that I feel like Netflix should actually stream, because I feel like that the types of people that watch Netflix like this kind of content. It's, I don't want to say it's edgy, that's not really the right word, but it's kind of interesting topics that maybe are not widely understood, told in a very engaging way. And I feel like that's kind of a lot of their USP, if you like, as a streaming platform. So I feel like for me, I would expect to see it somewhere like that. That would be my obvious as a consumer. I'd be like, this is the kind of venue that I would expect to see it. Whether they decide to do that or not, I don't know. I think they should before it gets too popular and somebody else picks it up. But it feels like
You'll
a natural
see.
home for me based on stuff they've done prior, right? So
So it's funny that you say that, because I always said that I was making a Netflix quality documentary. Like, that was my pitch to people. Like, I do not have a deal with Netflix, but I'm gonna make a Netflix quality documentary. Have you seen those recently? Okay, great. I know exactly how to do that, and I feel as a director, obviously, that I have a good idea and that I'm gonna make it better. So trust me with your money, that's what I'm gonna do. So it was always the Netflix was the thing. I did end up like, it was so much my obsession that I ended up talking to a lot of different people at Netflix, because everybody that I knew, I asked them, do you know anybody at Netflix? I don't know if I asked you actually, because I asked so many people. And I eventually got to different people at Netflix, and the movie wasn't done yet. So to their credit, they did say no to it before the movie was done. But the reasons why they said no were they already had crypto content, which is always a low blow for me when I hear that one. Um, but the movie wasn't done. So they had nothing to really know what it is that my intention really was with the movie. And they have their own really killer, because I do love their documentaries, interior production team for the documentary department. And they have already their production lineup of, and a major streamer, I think it was Showtime, but people should not quote me on this, but they should look it up. But one of these big intellectual property owners went bankrupt, and all of their intellectual property, all of their documentaries and movies were like for sale. And Netflix last year and this year has been like buying those up, because these are good documentaries of the past. So I'm actually really excited about that. So they have a killer team with a killer lineup of really incredible work coming up, and they just bought like an archive of really cool old documentaries. So I'm not getting paid for this. They said no to my movie, so I'm not advertising them at all. But from like the insider knowledge that I know, some really cool documentary content is coming to Netflix. But for the time being, I was told no by several people.
yeah, it's funny really though, because like, I mean, I actually cancelled my Netflix subscription because I don't like their algorithm. It was really annoying. It kept recommending stuff to me that I wasn't that interested in, and the search function wasn't great. And I was trying to find a certain type of movie, like, I don't know. I like sort of things like what was it called, that movie that was really funny? It was like, was it Little Miss Sunshine or something? That
It's one of my favorite movies of all
Oh
time.
my God, I love that. So that's the kind of movie that I like to watch. And I ended up subscribing, actually. It's a guy who's a Christian and he's also a Bitcoiner, funnily enough, but he's the guy that's the CEO of My Movies Plus. And I think it was like $26 a year. It was really cheap. And it's like Netflix, but it's run by a Bitcoiner. And it's got all these kind of independent sort of films in there. And some of them are like really, really off the wall. But there was like, I subscribed to that because I was like, I'm just going to try different services that aren't as commercial and it's not so repetitive, or I don't get fed this algorithm with like things that I just really.
Same things over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was one that I watched that was absolutely hilarious. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Honestly, it was so funny and it was so well made. And it was about Shia LaBeouf when lockdowns happened. I didn't even know this, by the way. I was in New York at the time, so I had no idea that this was going on. But basically, he'd installed a camera somewhere. Or was it? It was. I think it was when lockdowns happened, but it was also around about the time, or maybe it was when Trump was getting elected, and then it ran into lockdown, something like that. Anyway,
That
it was
looks
when
like a
Trump was.
blur.
But he
Yeah.
basically put, yeah, exactly, just like the whole thing. But he put a camera up somewhere in New York, and then they would go there every day and they would just stand in front of this camera going, "He will not divide us. He will not divide us," like chanting this. But then it turned into this thing, and I wish I had known about it at the time. It was so funny. People started trolling it and like turning up, and I didn't know, but apparently it's supposed to be this like white supremacist thing to drink milk. So people were rocking up and drinking milk in front of the camera and like just all this like weird stuff, and it turned into this whole thing. Anyway, it got so bad that Shia LaBeouf had a bit of a breakdown and had to take his camera away. And so he moved it to a different location that was secret. And then you had all these like autistic internet basement dwellers who basically like figured out from an aeroplane flying on camera and what flight path it was and what the weather was like and which way the wind was blowing, where this camera was, and found it. So then he had to move it again into like some other, I mean, it was so funny, the whole thing. I was just like dying watching it. It was like one of the best things I've ever seen. And it's such a weird documentary. It's so odd. Like the weirdest subject and the weirdest thing to do. So that's the kind of stuff that I wish we'd see more of because it's so memorable, you know? So I think there's definitely a shift in tone now for things that are a little bit more interesting, not so repetitive, not so generic, touch edgy. I think, yeah, that, you know, Dirty Coin is having its moment.
I thank you. Thank you, first of all. And yes, I wanted to make a film that encapsulated this time. And so far, I've had people tell me that that's what it did without me telling them that that's what I wanted to do. So that's always like the best part because it's like, haha, yes. Because you know, you try to do all these different things, but then you have to decide what to just to not do everything. So what are the things you're not going to do, even though there's such a great idea, but it's just not the place, it's not the time, and what's the most important thing to say, and where do we end things off? And I did test the movie out with a lot of people that were like not in Bitcoin because I wanted to see what people certain scenes. I didn't show everybody everything. A couple people, yes, but most people know. That I wanted to get impressions on different parts and how engaged they were because I really wanted to play with the rhythm of the movie. I really enjoy films that do that and filmmakers that understand that because you're not pausing that. You're not you're sitting down, especially if like I'm designing it for a movie theater, right? So I'm respecting that experience. Yes, eventually people will watch it in their home and pause it a million times and watch it on their phones, but from a movie theater perspective, you sit down, the movie starts, and you have this one experience until the very end. And what is that experience? What is that ride? I mean, you go to the bathroom, you lose some of it. You know, do you really need to go to the bathroom? Because you're gonna miss it. Can't pause it. And so how much popcorn are you eating? Do you want to like not bite too loudly because you really want to hear? I mean, there's all of these different cues, and you're watching it with other people. Who else is laughing? Who else got that joke in the theater? There's a lot of things sprinkled in there that a lot of people don't know. And so there's just little things, and that it surprises some folks that I even like went there for certain things. And I want that to be a shared experience. Everybody leaves at the same time. You had that energy and that experience, like a good concert. You go to a good concert that has a good set list and somebody respected. What I'm saying is, obviously, I didn't make this up. I've heard masters say this about their work, that they are, you know, composers say this, musicians, like world-class musicians, they're thinking about every moment from the moment the person walks in to the moment the person gets into their car and leaves. Some of them, you know, what does that whole experience looks like? And the better you understand that, the more you can capitalize on that. And you look at NFL's team events, you look at Taylor Swift concerts, you see where the merchandise is. I mean, everything has been considered. And yeah, I feel like that's something that I have been considering everything for everyone, and I've wanted them to have a good experience. Whether you don't really need to agree or disagree with the movie because I kind of presented things as they are. I chose certain things and not others because I wanted to shed light to this industry and what it does. And from there, the conversation starts, because right now I feel like I can't even have a real conversation with people about data centers and energy consumption, because the overall knowledge, like the overall information of this world, what the physical world of our digital lives looks like, most people have no knowledge of what that looks like. And they're not paying attention to Bitcoin because they're not in Bitcoin, so they don't care. But what's occurring against Bitcoin and the regulation that's going against Bitcoin is going to affect all of our digital lives, all of them. And so this is an important subject. And I would like for everybody to at least have like a base level of information. And then from there, we can have more. And there's really so much more to know. But really, let's all at least come to the same page, because the real conversation is going to happen after you watch it and after you research yourself certain things and maybe decide to mine. I feel like that's the number one. That was not my intention, by the way. It wasn't, but it kind of was. So like decentralizing the network, that would be kind of nice, but it was not my goal. But one of the major things that has come up has been, I want to start mining Bitcoin. That's from like so many different
It would
random
be kind
people.
of wrong if you didn't at this point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But that was not my intention. As you can see, it was not my intention in the movie. But that's like the number one question or maybe like number 3 question that I'm getting is, how can I start mining Bitcoin?
Wow. So maybe that's what you need to do next, is produce a nice how-to booklet with the beautiful graphics that you have in the film. That would actually be pretty cool. I feel like it needs a comic book, I'll be honest. When I look at those graphics, I was like, oh, I love these. This would be such a great, like, there's a story there of like a comic book that's just, whether it's Satoshi or whoever it is going on this journey. Park that one as well for another project. Before we wrap up then, I just wanted to ask you, could you give people a timeline of where Dirty Coin is going to be showing for what you have booked now, if they want to see it, where they can go? Like, I know that you've got I don't know how much you can share about the upcoming screenings, but if people want to see the movie, where can they go and see it?
So the very next screening is going to be at Arnhem on Bitcoin Pizza Day on May 22nd. And we're going to be over there with the Europeans screening our film. And Janet from Gritless is going to be there. Bert from Bitcoin Brabant is going to be there. So I am not going to be there, but they are going to host a panel after the movies. So Patrick from Bitcoin Casa or Bit Casa in Arnhem, he
You
is
have to
putting this
probably tell
together.
people somewhere where that is.
The Netherlands, at the Netherlands, Bitcoin City. And it's a place, it's a gorgeous little town, like gorgeous little Dutch town. I have been there. I'm just not going to go there this time because of, funds, but it's a great town and a lot of merchants accept Bitcoin and everybody knows how to use Lightning. And it's just a very like easy Bitcoin town. And so they're going to have a conference, which is the perfect place to have a conference, is you're in this cute Dutch town and all these places accept Bitcoin. And the movie theater, like the legitimate big movie theater there, Patrick rented it for Dirty Coin, and he also paid for the license for Dirty Coin so that we could be a side event for adopting Bitcoin. And that's one of the things about our licenses that I was very specific on wanting to do. Patrick is donating all of his profits to me, so I really appreciate that, but he doesn't have to. That was his offer. But anybody else that wants to screen the movie and sell tickets and get sponsors and put an event together, they can do that and not share profits with me. All they have to do is license the film, because they might not get that and I don't want them to lose money with it either. So I have like just one flat fee for people to license the film. And this is not for everyone. Not everyone's going to do this. This is for the people that really need to show it this summer, that really want to watch it this summer, that really want to contribute this summer, because all of the funds that I raise from these screenings, I will then use for the marketing and our push for our general release on Halloween all over the world. So our point is to get it in as many movie theaters in the world by Halloween, so that we can have a in theaters October 31st trailer. That's what I keep seeing in my head. And in order to do that, we need to send posters to these places. We need to translate the movie. We need to physically send drives to some of these places. Well, we just sent one that was $56. I mean, it's a lot of little costs. But all of that with the idea that if we are there, people will go, people will see it, and we will they'll pay $6, $7, whatever their movie theater bills them for tickets. So our summer screenings are the way that super plebs, VIPs, whales, however you want to call yourself, somebody that is doing something that you really don't really have to do, but to support the cause. I mean, these licenses will do that, and you get to show it before anybody else. You get to profit from it. I'm being as cool and as nice as I can with these licensing deals. But yeah, all of this is so that we can make it to theaters by Halloween, and people can take their moms, and people can take their girlfriends, and women can take their boyfriends, you know. High schools can go and learn about it. We put it in libraries after. So I really believe that this is important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have spent so much time working on it. And I do want as many people to watch it, even if they don't like it. They don't even have to finish it. But at a movie theater, it's harder to leave the theater.
I don't think they're not going to finish it, to be honest. I mean, it's great. Okay, cool. Well, so if you're not in Holland, is there anywhere else that you can see it before October?
Yes, yes. Actually, we have, thank you for asking. My God, there's just so many things. You think somebody speaks as much as me. How could she make such a short movie? I did. I can't edit down. It's just not live. So we're going to be in Berlin for the Bitcoin meetup. That one's going to be really exciting. We're going to be in Miami, June 24th. We're going to do an event here in San Juan. If anybody is in San Juan and wants to be a part of that one's going to, I'm going to invite people from the government. I'm going to invite people from the press. That was going to be like a lot, obviously my crew, the people from Puerto Rico that worked on it. So that was going to be ultra VIP, just because it's a small theater and there's just so many people I can invite. That one's in San Juan. And then Nashville, we're going to have one as well, July 24th. We have partnered with Thank God It's Bitcoin. Thank God for Bitcoin. Sorry. Like
Sorry.
Thank God for Bitcoin. And we're going to be at Rocket Town, and that's going to be a huge venue. And I am going to be doing an after party after that as well. Krista, we should talk about that offline. And then, yeah,
I'll come and sweep floors for you. I'll do whatever. Yes, that'd be so much fun. No,
Well,
I mean, if you need a spare pair of hands, I'm very happy to help out. That would be super fun.
thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, then let's definitely chat about that one. So we have really incredible events that are coming up, and some of those events I'm producing myself, like my company, Dirty Coin, is producing the events, and we'll be selling tickets, we'll be selling merch. I mean, we'll be doing what indie movies do to make money.
Where can one get a poster actually? Because I want a nice big poster for my wall. Where does one get one? Are they online available?
Not yet, because I put them online, and we got like a couple of people requesting them. This was like a year ago. And then I wasn't really ready to start shipping stuff and like be like wear that hat because I was still making the movie. So
Yeah.
now that we've finished the movie, yes. So we are looking at what's our workflow going to be, what's going to be the printer that we're at, like, how do we do this at scale, and kind of preparing to do this at scale because it's international, it's niche, but it's global. That desire for the poster, and we have such beautiful art, and it really does look pretty big. We designed them. We have a new poster coming out as well. So we're going to come out with a new merch store soon, very soon. But for sure, at all of the events that we put together, we actually, I just cleaned my desk. Otherwise, I would have been able to show you a bunch of things. But you see, that's why I should be messy. No, I'm kidding. No. But anyway, we'll be having merch at all these events as well. And yes, and that would be a great opportunity for people to like grab their merch.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alana. Thank you for seeing this project through to the end. I'm sure there were moments when you were just like, why did I sign up for this? So thank you for doing it, because it's a lot to make a movie at the best of times. And you did it in a bear market. You did it on a subject that's quite contentious. And The output is amazing. So I just encourage everyone to get your asses down to the nearest theatre and see it as soon as you can. And thanks again. And thank you for coming back. It's so nice to do the full circle. I feel very privileged and honoured to be able to ask you all these questions. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it again in Nashville, actually, because I'll be in Nashville. So I will definitely be there for that.
I think it gets better when you watch it like a couple of times, but I am biased. I've watched it a million times, so obviously, but
Can't
I'll
even
still look at
imagine.
things and I'm like, oh, that was a good call. That was good. That was good. You know, like, so I hope that I don't bore you to death, but if I ever see you walking out of the theater halfway, I will also not be offended. Don't worry.
Not at all. Thanks again. It's been
Thank you,
amazing.
Chris.